Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to God's Grace on Thee and Angel Wallace Productions. Today is Wednesday. It is the 28th of August of 2024. It is now 10:58 a.m. here in sunny Reno, Nevada. And it is 76 degrees and sunny, and it'll reach a high of 88 today. It's gorgeous weather. The leaves are already starting to turn. And as October approaches, it's the fall season, and it's one of my favorite times of the year. I just love it. I loved it as a child, and I remember walking to school and collecting leaves of various colors. I used to study them. I used to look at the veins, the structure, the design. To me, it was fascinating. Some of these trees, like the oak trees, they would throw these round nuggets that look like walnuts. And maybe that's what they're called, but I picked all those up. You know, everything that I found on my little journeys to and from school, to me was a fascination. And I even remember putting leaves between wax paper and then ironing the edges, because that would melt it together and it would hold your display in place. And I just was always involved in, loved doing things in arts class and science. Anyway, today is another reading from Jesus, Sananda. And let's start with recording 2. And this one is entitled, Will Seems to Be the Problem. Recording number 2, Sananda. Sunday, November the 5th, 1989, 3:20 p.m., year 3, day 081. Sunday, November 5th, 1989. Isu present to resume our writing. I would keep this within an hour and a half, please, for this morning was such a long session. Will seems to be the problem. Why? And how did this come to be? Let us briefly examine a possibility. You have creationists and evolutionists. Can we now consider a third possibility, please? Let us speak of possible restoration of your planet. Now consider that Lucifer got tossed out on his ear for willfulness of the highest degree against God. I will be God, he proclaimed. Let us so assume that this is correct for the obvious reason of discussion. Now Lucifer and his band of hoodlums romp through the universe in total chaos and destruction, evil energy unleashed. You have to consider some of the ancient proclamations which tend to structure some type of sequence. And it would seem that you will have to consider some things prior to Genesis, in that somehow there must have been some devastation when God rounded up Satan and his cohorts and brought them in for a little judgment. Now your own holy book indicates that all the angelic beings sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy. Now this indicates that there were already angels, for they all were in harmony as they shouted for joy at these events. The chronology indicates that God created the material universe before the angelic revolt and, consequently, before man's appearance on the planet. You have 2 vital points to consider at this juncture. The earth was created after the angels were, and yet before the angelic rebellion hosted by Lucifer. Could it be that there were actually restoration of your planet instead of creation, as you recognize your prophecies? Now, things were obviously in a total state of chaos without form and void. Now, this expression does not indicate under or undeveloped. It indicates something that is the result of a major catastrophe. Some of your scholars consider this as the gap theory, and it is suitable enough for this discussion, for none of your other speculations fit the scenario. This name fits the expanse of time, which elapsed at the onset of your history in Genesis. And let us consider that period of time between the original creation of the earth and its restoration from chaos as the great interval. And let us consider if a perfect God should create a very imperfect world, chaotic, waste and desolate, a wreck and a ruin, it would be a violation of one of the great spiritual principles stated by the God Spirit Himself. A fountain cannot send forth sweet water and bitter. Let us just suppose now that after the subsequent formation or reconstruction of the same earth which had been turned into chaos, God created man. And He has now come to center stage. And look what might have happened next. In eternity, past there was only one will, the will of God. There was no evil whatsoever, only harmony, holiness, and righteousness. When the second will entered the universe, generated by the heart of Lucifer, rebellion broke out. Time, as you know it, began with two wills in existence. Check the snake in the garden. Now, what did I generalize for you about sin? The shortest definition of sin is simply, I will. When Satan was born and stated his proud, I most certainly will, God invited him right out of his position of authority in his government. Lucifer, now called Satan, declared war, and the fat was in the fire. Brothers, do not think God is ever unprepared, for He already had His plan ready to activate Operation Man. Further, ye were granted consciousness, thought, and free will choice. And man's immaterial being was created in the very image of God. And I am sorry, beloved ones, but God does not wander hither and yon with arms and legs. His own image is the possession of will, intellect, emotion, moral reason, and everlasting existence. The soul. Angels also possess these qualities, with a few superior additives which set them apart from humans. Angels have greater mobility, intelligence, and frequency than does man. You are, however, given a vitally important quality in common. You both possess freedom of choice and the intellect to make choices. The angels watch you humans, study your every action, effort at guiding you, and always loving you. Why? What might they be learning? That God is just God? God is utilizing this scenario to demonstrate that He was perfectly just in His eternal judgment of them, and that His love is so great that it cannot be fathomed by any created being. Man's immaterial being will always exist. It will always live. In that sense, man is also in the image of God. At the time of his creation, man was given legal authority to rule himself and all of the earth. But he was further given responsibilities and rules. Aha! Now we have a great drama in the making. You need no identified tree with some tasty fruit. The subject at hand is that these new humanlings were given instructions to avoid a specific item. It was a grand test set by God to demonstrate His justice and His love to His angelic realms. Now, man was specifically told that if he ate from that particular named tree, that he would die. There was no evil in the tree. It was not sprayed with insecticide, which would poison the fruit, as might well happen this day and time. The evil was in the rejecting God's revealed will, and consequently rejecting fellowship with God. The stage was set, and Satan entered the scene, and he was equally prepared. He had worked his scheme well out beforehand. He apparently thought that the whole on-stage contest revolved around the simple act of making man fall. So you must remember something most important. Satan may be extremely clever and wise in his choices, but he is battling against a far wiser being, far wiser. When Satan caused man to fall, he played right into the hands of God. Far from defeating God, he set a trap for himself. He set up a situation through which God could demonstrate His justice and His love to the infinite degree. God did not want man to fall, but He wasn't in the least surprised that He did so. He still had a plan to save man from his own rebellious state. Satan at work. Well, you can bet Satan was not some slimy serpent. He was a most beauteous creature, for he was going to lure Eve. I believe the myth continues. He made sure she was completely curious about that tree, a trait that gets most of you into trouble. Just a little curiosity and a peek into the forbidden, and wham, you are stuck. Well, Satan had already put into this lovely mind the suggestion to just look at that tree. He uses the same ploy to this day. He needs never change his line of approach, for you fall every time to the lies and temptations. Satan, the superior intelligent being, invented one of the most clever attacks of all time, before or after the power of suggestion. The ability to put thoughts into your minds about things you already desire. He knows your natural weaknesses. He knows the areas where desire is strongest in you. He knew there was a basic curiosity, and he hit dead on center. Let us look carefully at how and what Satan is credited with saying to Eve. Indeed, has God really said, "You shall not eat from every tree of the garden"? The question will never be right on. It will always be clever and stated in such a manner as to start the doubt gnawing at your minds. Therefore, all Satan has to do was focus on the only forbidden item to set the trap. Satan is the all-time universal master at this trick. Satan's clever poison. Now, Satan is a master at planting seeds of doubt and question. He fogs you in, and you become confused. He probably surely did no less with Sister Eve. Now note that when Eve responded to the serpent, she added a note or two. From the fruit of the trees of this garden we may eat, but from the fruit of the tree which is in the middle of the garden, God has said, "You shall not eat from or touch it, lest you die." Hold up right here a minute, you lovely readers. She added her own embellishment to the original command as stated in Genesis. She added, "or touch it." She showed instantly that she didn't have the slightest notion about what the real issue was. She thought there was something in the tree itself that was evil. She made sin something material or tangible rather than a choice of the mind. Let us just say that she was really psyched out. Right from the beginning, the wrong issue came under point. Satan could see that he had her helpless and zeroed in with an outright denial of the Word of God. He simply came along with a direct repudiation of what God said and stated. You surely shall not die. Satan takes clear truth and drops just enough poison in it to kill you. But what of this Adam character? Well, poor dear thing. Eve ate from the tree, and immediately things began to happen, and she became totally confused and flustered. Therefore, you can say that the woman was confused, that she was deceived, and therefore wasn't legally responsible for sin. However, where is Adam's excuse? Ones are so permanently ready to blame poor dear Eve. But what about that Adam? There was no excuse for the man at all, and it was further laid forth as, and it was not Adam who was deceived, but the woman being quite deceived fell into transgression. Adam therefore gave in without a fight. There was not one word given directly to the man, not one temptation. He walked into transgression with his two eyes wide open. It seems that he simply chose to stay with Eve rather than continue with God. And he made a cold and calculated decision to reject God. Adam had the legal power of attorney over himself and the world, but he betrayed the trust God had given him and forfeited his authority to Satan. Flat for the count. In defying God, man was instantly lost to the count. In a remarkable manner, he did exactly what was projected. He died in important ways. He lost spiritual life, the most important sphere of life that you have. Man is made up of body, his material being, soul, his immaterial life, spirit, his spiritual life, with which he is able to communicate with God. The instant man disobeyed God, he lost this spiritual life and severed that direct line of communication with his Maker. Secondly, man received a nature of self-centeredness and rebellion against God. You can see this result throughout the history of mankind. God describes it as man's heart being desperately sick. Thirdly, Satan became man's absolute master. Man became the slave. It is really a heavy scene, but according to all the records you have, Satan is ruling all those who have rejected God. Lastly, when man rebelled, the world was legally handed over to Satan. Adam actually became the Benedict Arnold of the universe. When he obeyed Satan, he turned the deed of himself, all his dominion, all his descendants over to Satan. And therefore, now you have it. Satan is the ruler of the world. And what of the curse of Eve? Oh yes, back to the gap theory. In exchange for Eve's foolishness, God gave her as punishment a more severe time in childbearing, and thus and so. Worse than what? To be relative and be worse than indicates that there was already something present. So be it. I trust I have laid forth enough information for you to consider that possibility, to consider that possibly you have a problem with the most clever evil character. You have a far more potent God with unlimited ability, but you continue to limit him. My intent is to allow you to see how it comes to be in the temptations and the traps. And the farther you go, the deeper you get into the mire for you fail to turn around and see that you have help. You march forth like Eve, missing the point entirely. Now, there is only one way into safety and security, and that is to turn about and into the strength of the Creator God. You may think you have dipped into the depths and there's no way out of your quagmire. Nay, simply turn about and ask for the light and truth and desire, and it shall come forth. You are a willing victim. The minute you cease to be a willing victim, ye shall find your freedom. I'm going to finish this document in a most unpleasant manner. The items of satanic horror are kept from you. I need not linger over very many instances. I shall just quote from a few as they have been brought public and give you some insight as to who and how the game of satanic experiences is spread. And I'm going to get gory, bloody, and as violent as the words which come from the printed papers and accounts. I have no notion to spare your senses in the least. Read it and please weep for the horribleness herein. Weep for yourselves. If you are involved in the lie, weep for your brother, your sister, your parents, your children, and all mankind, for this is a terror story beyond all. Ye have refused to look and see too long. You will either change it or it will not be changed. You have become trapped on the treadmill of violence leading to more violence, and you are slowly deadened so that what was once, only a short while ago, unacceptable and vulgar no longer even interests you. We have preceded this document with 8 others, at least 4 of which deal with the evil empire about you. We further give unto you help. This deals with the personal evil within and without. And know here too is help. But you must recognize of it and ask. You are in the final play, and it depends upon you as to how the final act shall be played out. So be it, and Selah. Let us allow this to sit until morning next, Dharma, for you have had enough for this day. In love and total caring, I take my place at standby. I grant ye one's peace in abundance. I am Sananda.